guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be making a project that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, but I haven't been able to because it requires making molds. But recently I have been actually making molds, so I figured let's just do it because I've been waiting way too long for it. So today we are going to be making a baby Hydra. Anyways, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I need to work on to make our Hydra is all the heads. So I decided 5 would be a good number for our Hydra. Now for the sculpting of the head, I ended up doing this off camera because at first when I was making the head, I didn't really have a video planned for it, but then I realized it would be really cute for this project. So sadly, you won't be able to see me do the sculpting for this piece, but I did show how I did the molds and doing all the casting for all 5 of the heads. And then for the feet, these feet are going to be resin as well. I ended up making this mold for a previous project and I figured it would work really well for this. Now with my Hydra, we're not going to have back feet. I just figured having some front feet would be really cool. But anyways, let's get started on the painting because we have a lot of pieces to work on. Now you'll notice that the resin pieces I added a mica powder to, all but the feet, mainly because the feet I ended up doing separately and I forgot to add the mica powder. But the main reason I added the mica powder was that way all the cracks and crevices of the scales could be a darker color than what we have for the rest of the body. So I don't need to primer in all of those cracks and crevices. We can start with the main color for the body. All except for the feet. The feet will have to primer those to match the mica powder that we mixed in the heads. So I'm going to paint those and get those the same color, and then we can start going over everything with kind of a creamy khaki color because that's the color that I'm going to use for the body. And for the cream color, what I'm doing, that way I don't accidentally get it into all those cracks, is I'm going to just dab it on very gently. So I'm just like tapping onto the surface, adding the color, making sure it's a nice solid color, and then letting everything dry. And then the fabric that I'm going to use, I haven't shown it yet, but it does have a little bit of a sheen. So to try and match that color a little bit more, I'm going to add a pearlescent paint over the top of what I just did. That way everything has a nice gloss to it and it'll match the fabric a lot better. And then once that's dry, we can start working on more of the details of all the faces. So I'm going to start on the eyes, and it took me a little bit to decide on what color to do the eyes, but I ended up landing on green, mainly because I have another fabric that I'm using for the wings, and it has a little bit of a green tint to it, so I figured it would kind of match well and pull out those colors. Plus, it just made the eyes stand out a lot more going with that color than anything else. So I started with a darker green at first, just getting everything completely covered, and then I started lightening the center of the eye. So my goal is to have it kind of fade from a darker outer color to a more brighter green in the middle. Once I was done with that, I let it dry a little bit, and then for the pupils, I kind of cheated. Well, I found a way of making them a little bit easier. I ended up taking a fine tip Sharpie and I drew out the shape first. That way I could get that lined out first and I didn't have to paint it and figure out where I wanted it at the same time. So it just helped to sketch it out first and then paint it in with my acrylics. So if you guys have trouble laying out your pupils on your eyes that you're painting, I highly recommend this. It made it just so much easier. And then after that, I kind of cleaned up the edges of the scales around the eyes, just making sure that they had a little bit of a highlight and they were nice and clean. And then I decided that the underbelly of my Hydra is going to be kind of more of a metallic plum color, so I did my best and I'm actually really surprised with how well I matched this color because I started off with a purple and then I added a metallic almost red color to it to get that plum color that my fabric is. So I ended up just painting the bottom of the face this color, letting it dry, and then for the feet I didn't really have much more to do. I think I mainly just added some highlights here and there, some different colors for the scales, and then I painted the claws black. And then once I was done with all the painting, I let everything dry and then I re-resined everything. So with a clear resin, I just painted over everything to lock in the paint and protect everything. Okay, so our resin pieces are all done and now we can start on this sewing, and we have a lot to work on with this as well because we have 5 necks to sew and to figure out how they're going to connect to the body. So this is the paper pattern that I sketched out to use for our Hydra, and at first it looks pretty simple. It doesn't have any back legs or anything like that, but I did give him wings and front legs. But remember, we have 5 necks and heads and all of that to work with, so the neck pattern we're going to use to make a lot of necks. So because we have so many necks to sew, let's start on those first. For each one we have a left and a right, and then a strip of fabric for the underbelly of the neck. So we're going to sew all 5 of these together, and to be honest, I did a lot of this sewing at night when I was settling down because it just took me forever to do the sewing for this piece. Anyways, other than that, we have a pair of wings and some arms to work on. For the wings, I have this really pretty fabric that I found that's almost lacy, so there's holes and stuff through it, and I want to use it for the webbing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sandwich this between 2 layers of our body fabric, and I'm going to sew them together following the lines of the little pieces for the wings. So I'm going to do my sewing, and then once we have those all sewed together, we can cut out the shape of our wing. So it's just a lot easier to do the cutting after we sew everything together. And then for the arms, there's going to be a left and a right for each one, and we're just going to sew down the front of them. We're going to leave the backs open for when we put everything together. For the body and the belly pieces, we're going to have to wait and work on those after we start putting everything together. So, I need to make a really complicated wireframe. I decided to do this off camera because there was just so many wires going in all which direction, and I didn't want to scratch my camera or fling something off of the countertops and hit or break something. It was just a mess making this wireframe, but I got it all together. There's wires for all the necks, the legs, and we're gonna have wires for the wings as well. So let's get everything added to the wireframe. I'm going to start with our resined heads. We're going to glue them to each individual wire for the neck. We're going to get all 5 in place, and then we can start adding the fabric for the necks. So I'm going to start with 3, which are going to be more of the bottom heads. I'm going to sew the bases of these neck pieces together, and then I'm going to glue them around the bases of the 3 heads that are going to be at the bottom. And then once we have that in place, I'll let it dry for a little bit, and then we're going to stuff and close up these 3 necks. And then we're going to work on the next 2 heads, which are going to be positioned right above the 3 that we just did. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the fabric for those 2 necks, we're going to sew the bases of those together, and then we're going to sew those on top of the necks that we have. So I'm going to sew everything together, and then we can take the fabric and we can start gluing it around the bases of those 2 heads, let that dry, and then stuff and close those up as well. At this point, I just started getting super excited to finish our Hydra because seeing all the heads and necks together, it just looked really good, and I was just ready to get that body done. So for the body, we have fabric for the left and right, the belly fabric, and a piece of fabric that's going to be on the top portion. So let's start getting those sewn together. So we're just going to sew these to the bases of all the necks that are sewn together, and then we can start closing everything up. Once we have those fabric pieces in place, I need to figure out where the wires for the legs are going to go, cut some holes, and run those through the fabric, and then we can start putting the body together. So I'm going to start with the left and right in the belly piece, and I'm just going to sew all 3 of these together going down the length of the body. And then once we get those in place, I'm then going to take the fabric for the wings, we're going to run them onto the wires for the wings, and then we can start sewing those in place and closing everything up, and of course stuffing the body. Now the body got really wide because of how many necks were on the front of it. We had to make it quite a wide piece, so he came out really cute and chubby. And then of course we need to add our arms. So I'm going to take the fabric for the arms and I'm going to sew it onto the body where those wires are hanging out. So I'm going to sew those in place, and then we can take our resined hands for the arms. I ended up drilling some holes into the bases of them, and we're going to connect them to the wire frame. So I'm just going to end up gluing them onto the wire frame, and then we can take the fabric for the arms, glue them around the bases of the hands, stuff and close everything up. Lastly, I want to add just a little bit of extra detail to the piece. So I have this one fake leather that's gold and has a scaling pattern on it. I decided to take this fabric and cut out some of the scales, lay them over the top of the head, just kind of adding a little bit of decoration around that. And then I ended up gluing a few scales going down the back of our HYDRA. Nothing fancy, I just wanted to add a little bit extra to it. Okay guys, and here is our baby Hognose HYDRA. I had so much fun with this project, and I definitely want to make more HYDRAs. This guy is going to be in my shop, and if he sells, I'll probably make another one. They're just very time consuming, so I won't have multiple in my shop. It'll be kind of a, if he sells, I'll make a different one of a different color variation or something. But I do want to make a different type of him, so if you guys are interested, and maybe a scary version of him, let me know. Obviously we'll do completely different faces and stuff, but we might keep the same pattern because it worked really well for him. Anyways, the baby HYDRA will be in my Etsy shop, so if anyone wants to give him a home, check the links down below. Also, I have links down there to a lot of different art supplies that I like to use to make my art dolls, so if you're interested in any of those materials, check those links out too. Now these are affiliated links, so they do help support the channel if you buy anything through them. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!